Hi all, I'm about to show you another of my favorite games. This is the game number 7 on my list. It is the game between Garry Kasparov and Anatoly Karpov from their 1990 World Chess Championship played in Lyon. It's one of the most famous games, and the analysis that I'm gonna show to you, I included some provided by Garry Kasparov, who won this game. I think it's very instructive, very highly tactical, I would say. So if you wish, you can investigate for yourself a lot. This game is very complicated and impossible to discuss in less than 40 minutes, so to speak. So I will try to be quick, but I do not guarantee anything. So yeah, so let's just dive in and see this game as is. So Kasparov opened with e4, e5 by Karpov, knight f3, attacking the pawn, knight c6, defending the pawn, bishop b5, attacking the piece that is defending the pawn, a6. This is called the mainline Ruy Lopez Morphy defense. It should be noted that this combination, bishop takes c6, pawn takes c6, knight takes pawn, does not exactly win the pawn because queen to d4 actually attacks both the knight and the pawn, and after, let's say, knight f3, queen takes pawn, black stands very well. I think he has completely no problem. White does not have castling rights, so it's pretty terrible. That's why Kasparov just moved the bishop to a4, knight f6, castles, bishop e7. So both sides simply developing their pieces. Now rook e1, reinforcing the pawn. Of course, it was possible to take that. This is known as open Spanish game. But after d4, b5, bishop b3, and say d5, this is like a main line. And I think I will be showing this line in game number 4 or 5 on my list between Kasparov and Anand. But that's not for now. Now we're in a different game. So after bishop a4, knight f6, castles, bishop e7, rook e1, reinforcing the pawn, b5, kicking the bishop, bishop to b3, controlling the long diagonal, d6, developing c3. Now c3 is a common move in Ruy Lopez, in which white wants to play d4 and expand in the center. c3 is aimed to support that. Castles, h3. h3 is important. If white was to go d4 right here, he would face bishop to g4, pinning the knight. It's kind of unpleasant, because now if you play h3, black can eliminate the defender of the d4 square and actually win a pawn here, which is not pleasant. So that's why Kasparov plays h3, simply preventing this idea of bishop to g4. Oh, sorry. In here, bishop b7 by Karpov, putting the bishop on the long diagonal, d4 as planned, rook e8. So now sometimes black aims to put this bishop back and looks for some tactics on e4 pawn. There's a congestion of pieces attacking this pawn. Knight bd2. This is a common maneuver in the Ruy Lopez, which goes like this: knight d2, knight f1, and then either to e3 or g3. From where it can go to the f5 and often take part in some attack. This is a very common maneuver in this line. Anyone who plays the Ruy Lopez has to be familiar with this. Bishop f8, as I mentioned, Karpov now has ideas of taking this pawn and possibly trying to win this one here. a4. Kasparov wants to exploit the fact that the pawns of Karpov on the king's side, queen side, sorry, are a bit overextended, and hence attacks them. h6. Of course, there is no point in taking this, because this actually only allows the bishop some more activity, also opens up the line for the rook, so you never do that. Just wait there. h6 by Karpov, possibly preventing any knight g5 ideas or bishop g5 in the future. These are all, let's say, on the agenda. Bishop c2, reinforcing the pawn so that these tactics that I mentioned previously, that after it is taken, some of these pieces may be trying to win the pawn. Now it's given more support. But e takes d4 nevertheless, takes back, and knight b4. hitting the bishop on c2, which drops back. It may seem that these pieces are sort of passive because they're all on the first rank, but actually they're pretty good. These bishops are eyeing the king side and will prove to be very dangerous in the future, so it's not that white is any worse. c5, expanding on the queen side, and d5, taking more space in the center and shutting down this bishop a little bit, because now it's attacking a pawn which is defended by a pawn, which is, well, not a very active post. Knight d7, probably remaneuvering the knight, trying to come to e4, e5, get some activity going. From f6 there was no active plan for this knight. Rook a3. So here Kasparov probably is preparing to bring the rook over to the king side and start an attack. Also maybe add some more security to this d3 square, because here maybe the idea of Karpov could be c4 and trying to bring this knight over to d3. Of course now it's not as powerful because it's double protected, so it wouldn't really be strong, but still, I mean, that was the idea and it was prevented with this move. Here Karpov played f5. He really puts pressure on the center, so Kasparov, well, the engine says e takes f5 should have been played, but after that I think bishop takes d5, knight e4, and bishop back, a takes b5 and d5. Here black does not really have any problems. He has two strong pawns in the center, and after the knight retreats, rook takes. This position is simplified, and really black is in no danger. It's equal. That's why Kasparov simply brought his rook over to e3, creating this battery over here. Now e takes f5 is a threat, but Karpov played knight f6. Probably a better move would be f4, simply to grab a lot of space on the king side and force this rook to go back and bring the knight over to e5. And the line that Karpov could have gone for is this one, in which black is actually doing very well. It's -1, and well, I would say that was his best chance in this game, because as you can see, okay, queens are getting exchanged, but white's king is wide open, and I think I think this position was a very good chance for Karpov. But okay, let's go back. Okay, so after f5, rook to e3, and then knight f6, so putting more pressure on the pawn, and knight h2. Now, what could be the idea behind knight h2? It could be either to move the pawn, either to make a space for the queen, or perhaps to one day maneuver the knight to g4 or to f1 and g3. All of these are possible, and definitely will be used, especially this queen maneuver over to the king side. And here, probably the best move given by the engine is f takes c4, after which knight takes c4, knight takes d5, and knight takes f6 check, takes back with knight, and then everything gets sort of simplified. And even though white still has a very strong battery with his bishop and the queen, I wouldn't say this is any big of an advantage, and that was also a good chance for Karpov to equalize, but he didn't play that. He played king h8. King h8, I think it was a little prophylactic move, so to speak, so simply getting off this open diagonal, also maybe getting off the g file if the rook ever came here, could possibly be very dangerous for him. And here Kasparov simply played b3, supported his a4 pawn, also prevented all these c4 ideas. This was taken, and c4. So that was Karpov's plan altogether. Bishop b2. So now the dark squared bishop is joining the attack, puts pressure on this black king, and as we can see, these two bishops are really giving him a headache. So now the pawn in the center was taken, knight took back, and the knight took on d5. So it seems that this position seems similar to all of the lines that I discussed previously and called equal. But actually after rook g3, we can see that the rook also joins the attack. So we already have quite a lot of attacking pieces here. Rook t6 was played by Karpow, so supporting the 6th rank possibly. And now knight g4, so another attacker. So as we can see, these bishops are eyeing the king. This knight attacks the h6 square. Remember, this pawn is pinned from the bishop, so it will not be able to recapture. Possibly even the queen will come over here. 2 knights and the rook. That's a serious attack. And even though the engine does not like this position for white, I think from the human perspective, it's really way better for white. Karpow played queen e8, which is the best move in the position. So not only is he building up on the e-file, but also he's adding more control to this, so like these light squares on the king side. But here came the first blow. Kasparov took on h6, which is really the essence of the whole attack. Now, in his comments to this game, he said that, well, he has so many attacking pieces that trading a knight for a pawn should not really matter, it's just trading an attacker for a defender. Now, Karpow did not take the knight, he played c3, but there were a lot of options. Karpow could have taken the knight with rook takes h6, but Kasparov said after the game that his plan was knight takes d6, so as we can see there is a double attack on the queen, and well, he could move queen h5, for instance. This is the move suggested by the engine, but still, after rook g5, again the queen is under attack. He cannot take the rook, obviously, because of knight f7 check, winning the queen. So he would probably take on d1, but now knight f7 check, king g8, knight takes h6, remember the pawn is pinned, king h8 and rook d1. And let's say after c3, shutting down these bishops, this pawn is actually very dangerous. Simply knight f7 again, king g8, bishop g6. So now stopping this king there, you see that white is building kind of a fortress there. And if the bishop is taken, then simply rook h5, and it turns out that there's actually no defense to this checkmate. Whatever white plays on the next move, say he makes the queen, then, well, that's simply a checkmate. So that's a brilliant idea. So queen h5 was not an option. What if Karpow maybe played queen d7? So attacking the knight. Well, then Kasparov had queen g4 prepared. Again, there is a tension between queens. If he was to exchange the queens, then knight f7 check, king g8, knight takes h6, another fantastic check. It is not really possible to take it because then rook takes g4 check, king f7, bishop g6, there is only one move here, king g8, bishop f5 check. There are two moves, but king f7 is the only, actually, because moving the bishop to g7, well, is even worse. So king f7, bishop e6 check, so attacking the knight. The king has to come to the e-file, so the knight falls with check, and there goes the bishop as well. A huge advantage for white. Actually, he is up a whole rook. So Karpow couldn't have gone for that. Okay, what if he didn't take the queen? There are many other options. He could, for instance, let's say, he could, for instance, capture the knight on d6. Well, then queen h5 check, king g8 has to go. If rook h6, then simply queen takes rook, wins, and after a few moves, that's actually checkmate. And if the rook does not move, if the king moves over, then simply bishop h7 check, king h8, bishop g6 check, king g8, and queen h7 checkmate. So as you can see, every line is finishing with checkmate. There is one other move, queen takes d6, but that's also made in several moves. Bishop takes g7, bishop takes g7, and queen takes g7 mate. Or if the bishop is not taken with king to g8, then simply bishop takes on h6, king f7, and well, that's either queen h5, say, And now the only move is queen g6, and well, that's taken, and that's checkmate. So another really beautiful move. Now there is one other option. If the queen is sacrificed with queen takes on e1, well then of course we have to take back, and Karpow would take the rook on d6, knight on d6, sorry. So okay, it seems that maybe black has a material compensation, but again, look at white's pieces, look how active they are. It's really hard to defend, and here Kasparov would simply play queen e4. So he is threatening mate on h7. So in this case, Karpov's best chance was to block the bishop so that there is no mate. But simply queen h4 check. Well, the king has to move. Again, if the rook tries to block, then queen takes rook. The pawn is pinned. So king to g8, and simply bishop takes on g7. And this is over. If bishop takes g7, queen g4, and you're attacking the bishop, and there is no way to protect it. Actually, here the best chance for black is to run, but again, this is losing all of the material. Now, if this rook is trying to be saved, then actually rook g8 is checkmate. So devastating advantage. So let's go back to the game continuation, because I'm getting into the analysis a bit too much. And here Karpov played c3, locking down this bishop. He didn't take the knight. So Kasparov moved the knight away, intensifying the pressure on g7 possibly, making room for the queen to come to h5 with check. C takes b2, Karpov won the bishop, but still queen g4. So you see that all of the pieces are now coming for the g7 pawn. And here the best move given by the engine is actually knight c6, but it loses anyway. Knight takes g7, and what do? You cannot take back. The engine says rook not rook f7, rook g6, but it doesn't really matter. Queen to h4 check. King, let's say, well, he may even take on g7. Okay, that's still fair. But after rook takes g6, say queen takes g6, and here simply knight takes d6. And and if queen takes, for instance, then it's mate in 2. After, remember about this bishop, queen h7, king f6, and queen g6 is mate. So again, completely devastating advantage. Karpov is a human. He played bishop c8, trying to maybe get some play with this bishop, line it up with the queen, but there is simply no defense. Queen h4 check. If king g8 is played, then actually king h2 wins. Move king h2 is very elegant because it is a move with a king that actually is very aggressive. It is aimed at, after this knight moves, this rook on e1 will fall without check. So, and that's quite important in this case. So if we just went with a computer line, well, the computer says give up your rook for the knight, it's the best thing you can do, but of course it's stupid. If really anything else is tried, like for instance rook g6, then knight g5 simply wins. If queen takes rook, then it's mate in 1. Okay, so after bishop c8 by Karpov, queen h4 and rook h6 was played because king g8 loses, as I said. Knight takes h6, g takes h6, and king to h2. So again, the same purpose. It wasn't the best move. The best move was rook e2, but based on the fact how elegant king h2 is, that is actually a finishing blow, and it's a move with a king on the other side of the board, then well, that's kind of impressive. That's what really makes this game beautiful. Karpov played queen e5, tried to get his queen to play. The best move according to the engine is bishop g7, but it loses anyway. After knight takes d6, it's game over. Queen takes d1, say queen takes h6, bishop takes h6, and knight f7 is checkmate. So again, beautiful move. So after queen e5, knight g5 was played by Kasparov. Again, sacrificing the rook, which cannot be taken due to knight f7 mate. Remember about this bishop watching out for the h7 square is a very important piece. So after queen f6, Kasparov simply brought all of his pieces into the attack, and you see all of his pieces are playing. And you really cannot say the same thing about Karpov's pieces, can you? These pieces are completely out of the game. They do not contribute to the position in any way. In here, Karpov played bishop f5, which actually allows mate in 6, but Kasparov did not find mate in 6, but I can show it if you want. You can pause your video and find it, but it's knight f7, queen takes f7, queen takes h6, bishop h7, rook takes a8, knight f6, rook takes, and after this we end up with a checkmate. Of course it's very difficult to find, but Kasparov found even a more beautiful move. Even though it's not as accurate, it's still beautiful. Queen takes h6, sacrificing the queen. Karpov took the queen, and knight f7 simply forks the king and the queen. Also, not this one. Also, you have to see that this king is completely trapped behind, maybe not behind his own pieces, but he's attacked from all possible sides. So let's say king h7 was played, bishop takes f5 check, queen g6, bishop takes on g6 was played. It's not the best move. Better was rook takes g6, because it actually threatens mate. If say knight f4 is played just to interfere, then simply rook to g3, knight g6, rook takes g6, and again this threat is there. If the queen is promoted, similar reason, you just take it, and after say, well, if rook takes rook, then it's mate very simply. Rook g5, of course blocking, you give up all the material, and then it's mate. That was more accurate, but Kasparov didn't need to do that, and he simply captured the queen. After king moved, he took the rook. And they played for a couple of more moves, because Karpov still has this b2 pawn that could prove to be dangerous, but there is all-day protection on it. So rook b8, a5, blocking this rook's influence on the b file, but still bishop e4 check, king takes knight, bishop takes d5 check. And it was in this position that Anatoly Karpov resigned the game. What he could have done, really, if you want to give this pawn away, okay, now you're down 2 exchanges and 2 pawns, so it's completely pointless to do that. And if you don't take it with a knight, well, if you go here, then simply bishop a2, still protecting this pawn. You can even sacrifice the bishop, it doesn't matter. You simply win the b2 pawn, then there is no hope for black. So I think it's one of the most brilliant games ever, even though I gave it only the 7th place in the rating. I think maybe I should rearrange it when I see it, because every time I see it I think it's a true brilliancy, master calculation. Even though like the opening is kind of boring and there are no fireworks for straight ahead, I would say that from the move 18, which is around that what you see, the position is getting more and more dangerous for black. And as I pointed out numerous times, all of white's pieces are actually joining the attack. So yeah, so black simply couldn't do anything about to stop this attack, basically. So yeah, I think if there is a lot to be learned from this game, and there is a lot to investigate, and I advise you, if you want to develop your skills at chess, to take a look at these positions, investigate them for yourself. Maybe you can find some interesting lines. You can also use the engine, it's also very helpful in some cases. But just pay attention to how elegant Kasparov's moves are, how he exploits all Karpov's weaknesses, how he sacrifices pieces one after another. That's a true chess art. So let me know in the comments if you enjoyed it or not. If you have any suggestions for the games to come, please inform me about them. And I hope you enjoyed the video, and bye for now. See you in the next one.